The merchant station of Nexus 7 hummed with the chaotic energy of 1,000 species conducting business in the neutral zone. Mason wiped down the counter of his small food stall, watching the parade of aliens drift past. He'd been running Mason's Earth Eats for 3 years now, serving humanity's culinary contributions to whoever had credits to spare. Business was slow today. Most species found human food too bland, too spicy, or biochemically incompatible with their digestive systems. Mason didn't mind. He'd left Earth to escape expectations, not to get rich. A small sound caught his attention, a whimper almost imperceptible beneath the station's ambient noise. Mason leaned over his counter and spotted them. 2 small aliens huddled against the wall of his stall. They were barely 3 feet tall, with pale blue skin that shimmered like starlight, and large dark eyes that dominated their delicate faces. Their thin bodies trembled, and they kept glancing around nervously. "Hey there," Mason said softly, moving around the counter. "You kids okay?" The larger of the 2, a girl he guessed, pulled her companion closer. "Please, sir," she whispered in heavily accented but understandable standard. "We are lost. We cannot find our mother." Mason crouched down to their level, his heart clenched at the fear in their eyes. "How long have you been lost?" "2 cycles, the smaller boy said, his voice barely audible. "We are so hungry." 2 cycles meant almost 6 hours on this station. 6 hours for children this young to be alone in a place like Nexus 7, where not everyone had kind intentions. Mason felt anger rise in his chest, not at the children but at whatever circumstances had led to this. "Come on," he said, standing and gesturing toward his stall. "Let's get some food in you, then we'll find your mom." The children hesitated, but hunger won over caution. They followed Mason behind his counter, where he pulled out 2 chairs and sat them down. He studied them carefully, trying to remember his xenobiology training. Their species was unfamiliar, which meant he needed to be careful about what he served. "What can your people eat?" he asked gently. The girl, she'd said her name was Lyra, looked uncertain. "Mother says we must be careful. Most foods make us sick," Mason nodded. "Okay, we'll start simple." He pulled out plain rice, steamed vegetables, and some mild broth. If their biochemistry was anywhere close to compatible with humans, these basics shouldn't cause harm. He watched as they took tentative bites, then devoured the food with desperate hunger. Their shimmering skin seemed to brighten slightly, and color returned to their faces. Mason felt a wave of relief. "More?" he asked. They nodded eagerly. Over the next hour, Mason fed them carefully, slowly introducing different foods and watching for any adverse reactions. Between bites, Lyra and her brother Cale told him about their mother, who worked somewhere important but wouldn't say where. They'd wandered away while she was in a meeting and the station's crowds had separated them. "She must be so worried," Lyra said, tears welling in her enormous eyes. "We'll find her," Mason promised. "After you're done eating, I'll close up shop and we'll search together. Station security can help." But before he could reach for his comm unit, a disturbance rippled through the marketplace. The usual chaos quieted. Merchants stopped hawking their wares. Even the most aggressive traders stepped back from the main thoroughfare. A woman strode through the parting crowd, and Mason understood immediately why silence followed her. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with the same pale blue, shimmering skin as the children, but her presence commanded absolute attention. She wore robes that seemed woven from light itself, and her eyes, though similar to the children's, held the weight of worlds. Behind her marched a full security detail in armor Mason recognized. Sovereign Guard, the elite protectors of the Galactic Council. "Mother!" Lyra and Cale shouted simultaneously, scrambling from their chairs. The woman's severe expression cracked. She dropped to her knees as her children ran to her, wrapping them in her arms with a desperation that transcended species. For a moment she was just a mother who'd found her lost babies. Then those ancient eyes turned to Mason. "You fed them," she said. It wasn't a question. Mason suddenly felt very small. "They were hungry, ma'am, lost. I couldn't just— Do you know who I am, human?" Mason shook his head. The Sovereign Guard had formed a perimeter around his stall, and he was acutely aware that he'd just involved himself in something far beyond his understanding. "I am Darcy, High Counselor of the Galactic Assembly, voice of the 7 sectors, and keeper of the colonial peace." Her voice carried centuries of authority. "I govern 2,000 worlds and 50 trillion souls." Mason's legs felt weak. He'd been feeding the children of essentially the most powerful woman in known space. I didn't know. Darcy stood, still holding her children close. For 6 hours I tore this station apart, searching for them. I had 300 security personnel, the station's entire surveillance network, and the cooperation of every authority figure in this sector. She paused, and something shifted in her expression. Yet it was one human, working alone in a food stall, who actually helped them. I just did what anyone would. No. Darcy's interruption was firm. Most saw them and looked away. The desperate and lost make people uncomfortable, but you fed them without question, without payment, without knowing who they were. She studied Mason with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Tell me, Mason of Earth, why do humans do this? Mason blinked, surprised she knew his name. Do what? Care for strangers, protect the vulnerable, feed the hungry even when there's nothing to gain. Darcy gestured to his modest stall. You have little, yet you gave freely. Because they needed help, Mason said simply. And I could help. That's just what you do. Darcy was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her entire bearing. The Galactic Council has debated humanity's petition for membership for 3 years. Many species question whether humans belong among us. They point to your violent history, your aggressive expansion, your emotional volatility. Mason's heart sank. He'd left Earth partly to escape that reputation. But I think, Darcy continued, they miss what truly defines humanity. You are a species that chose to be better, that wrote compassion into your core values even when survival suggested otherwise, that sees a stranger's child and thinks first of their hunger, not their utility. She placed a hand on each child's head. You protected my most precious treasures without knowing their value. You saw only children who needed help. For this, Mason of Earth, you have the gratitude of the High Counselor, and my eternal friendship. Mason didn't know what to say. I was just trying to do the right thing. Yes, Darcy said softly. You were, and that perhaps is the most human thing of all.